Good evening, everyone. Darby, are we recording?
Yes, I just started recording.
Perfect, thank you. So, all right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our July 13th Pullman Police Advisory Committee. I am Stephanie Rink, the chair. So right now, any members of the Pullman Police Advisory Committee, if you are able to, please show your video. That way, Darby will be able to take roll in attendance. One of the couple things for housekeeping that we will do today is everyone right now will remain muted. Also with the advisory committee, you will be muted. If you have any questions for the Pullman Advisory Committee, please raise your hand. You will be able to raise your hand by going to the participants, and you'll be able to raise your hand at that. There's a little blue icon with a little hand to raise hand, and we'll be able to see that and we'll be able to call on you. The participants that are here joining us, we will have presentations, and at the very end, we'll have a Q&A for the presentation. So please hold your questions to the very end, and please make sure you raise your hand and we can call on you when you have questions or comments. And I think those are all our housekeeping things. Darby, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Great. All right, Darby, if you have any questions about the attendance, please let me know and we can do roll call. But right now we will go through the approval of minutes. So our last meeting was on May 11th. For our advisory committee, you have all received the minutes and you have all read those minutes. And do you have any questions or comments or concerns about the minutes provided? If you do, please raise your hand and Darby can unmute you. All right, I don't see any raised hands, so do we have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, Alexander, you motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Barbara. All in favor, say aye.
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 Perfect. Thanks, Adam. Saw that. Wonderful. All right. Any opposed? Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. Our first order of business, we are going to have a special discussion with the Pullman PD chief and officers on department culture, training, and accountability. Chief Jenkins, I will turn this over to you.
Thank you. Now that I'm unmuted. So there's a national discussion going on, I'm sure everyone is aware of it, regarding concerns and demands for changes and reforms in law enforcement. And so what I wanted to do tonight was to describe the things that we have already been doing and things that we're currently doing and things that we plan to do to kind of set a baseline because it doesn't make sense to talk about making changes and let's know what we're already doing and figure out what we need to change from where we are. Before I do that, I want to remind everyone about the human element involved in law enforcement and anyone who works in law enforcement. Well, we asked the board and officers to a little bit about why they became a police officer, why they chose Pullman Police Department to work. And if you feel comfortable, talk a little bit about the culture. So with that, and our first officer will be Officer Garrett Willis. Garrett attended high school in New Mexico. He has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from New Mexico State University. He was a in the Army for 5 years, including overseas deployments. He was a Lewiston police officer from January 2017 to May of 2019. And was I frozen there for a bit?
I think you just had really choppy audio. I don't know if that was just me. Is that what everybody was getting?
I was getting that too, yeah.
Okay, let me close a couple of programs here. Maybe it goes smoother. So He served on the SWAT team for the Lewiston Police Department after a 5-year stint in the military. We hired him in May of 2019, and already he is a patrol tactics trainer, and he lives in Moscow with his wife and young child. So Garrett, it's yours. You're up, Garrett. Go ahead and unmute yourself. There we go.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Okay, I appreciate the introduction, Chief, and can everybody hear me? Okay, good. So I definitely appreciate the introduction, Chief. He told my story pretty much in a nutshell. Born and raised in New Mexico, served in the Army for a stint, and now I'm serving as a Pullman police officer. So first I'll get into why I became a cop. I come from a culture of police officers. My dad was a police officer. My uncle was a police officer. I've always felt a very strong duty to serve. I've always felt if not me, then who else is going to step up and do it? And I would rather see myself of somebody high in moral character than somebody in low moral character get the position instead and potentially be harmful to the community in some way. As far as why Pullman, I really love serving the community of the Palouse. I find it's an extremely great place to live, and it has great people. I am much happier serving where I serve now than I was prior. I enjoy going to work every day, and I'm more than happy to be a Pullman police officer. In my just over a year at Pullman Police Department, I've seen a culture of accountability, which I absolutely love. Everybody holds themselves accountable. And too often in policing, you see a history of kind of a good old boys club where it's not what you do, but it's who you know. And I've seen the opposite at the Pullman Police Department, which is very refreshing. I hadn't even been at Pullman Police Department a year, and they recognized some of my abilities and sent me to Patrol Tactics Instructor School in Vancouver, Washington, which was a supreme opportunity for me to learn and bring back knowledge to the Pullman Police Department that's cutting edge. And it's a brand new course. I was only the second class in the state of Washington to go through this course. So to see Pullman be ahead of the curve and not just send one officer, but 2 officers to this course to bring back all this knowledge was incredible. It's hard to describe coming from a different police department into Pullman, but a lot of times you have to put in your time, regardless of what you did before you became an officer, in order to get opportunities to succeed. What I like so much about the Pullman Police Department is they recognize your talent right off the bat without having to prove yourself just at that department first. You know, they don't have the mentality, if you didn't learn it here, you don't know it, but instead they're recognizing your ability that you might know stuff coming in, which is very refreshing. I've received more training in my year at Pullman PD than I received in 2.5 years at my last agency, which really speaks to, I mean, the structure that we have in place and the training that we have in place. Training is really what is the key to keeping officers safe, out of trouble, and accountable at the end of the day. If we have more knowledgeable and tactically proficient officers, they're going to make more sound decisions under high stress, which is incredibly important because we only have moments to make decisions that are going to be scrutinized for months after that. So it can be very difficult. I like that Pullman Police Department never stops progressing. We have a great progression that we try and go through as far as especially training is concerned. One story that I want to share that when I first got hired really resonated with me and made me feel like I made the right decision to leave a department that I was very secure at and take a leap of faith to come to the Pullman Police Department. We had a meeting within the first few months of me getting hired, and Chief Jenkins was speaking at the meeting, and something he said that resonated with me is, we're never going to do something simply because we've always done it that way. we're going to constantly be reassessing why we do something, and we need to have a good reason for why we do it. So why that resonates with me is because too often there was questions I had in the past where at prior agencies and prior jobs where they said, well, we do it this way because we've always done it this way. But that's not a reason to do something. A reason to do something is a legitimate, articulate reason why you are doing an action. And if you can't justify that action legitimately, you probably need to reassess your tactics, training, and other things to make sure that it meets the modern current era of policing. So at this point, if anybody has any questions, I would definitely be willing to answer some questions. That's kind of in a nutshell how I feel about the culture, why Pullman, why I became a police officer, and yeah.
Anybody have any questions for Garrett?
I will
All right.
just say that wonderful, and we're so glad that you're here, and it's so nice to hear about all the training that you've received. So a pleasure that you're here in Pullman with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I will take any opportunity to talk to anybody I can. I'm very passionate about this job and this department. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Garrett. Appreciate you attending tonight.
Thank you, Chief.
Next officer is Ashley Lamb. Ashley attended Aberdeen High School. She has a bachelor's degree in liberal arts from Evergreen State College. We hired Ashley initially in February 2014 as a records specialist. And she served in that capacity for 4 years. And then she decided she wanted to be a code enforcement officer. So we had her become a code enforcement officer in March of 2018, and she did that until January of 2019 when she decided she wanted to be a police officer. And she went through all of the testing of all of the other police officer applicants and was selected to be a police officer, and she attended the academy from February through June of 2019. So Ashley, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ashley Lamb. So my road to being an officer, first, sorry, I'm at Silverwood. It just kind of happened. So that's, my hair looks like I just got off the slides. It's because I did. So I became an officer because of Pullman. Like Chief said, I worked there in records and then in code enforcement. And I had never thought about being a police officer until we started having a lot of openings, and a lot of other officers kept asking me when I was going to apply. And I just told them that wasn't what I wanted, and no, and it's just something I didn't think I'd be interested in. But I loved my job. I loved the people I work with. When I went up to code enforcement, I kind of got to see a lot of more of the officers and work one-on-one with them. I had read a lot of reports and typed a ton of reports and records, but I hadn't really seen much in action. So I went up to code enforcement and kind of got to get to know a lot of the officers a little better, work with them on calls, and kind of see more what a police officer does, which is a lot different than I guess even I imagined, and I worked there. And then one day, I distinctly remember when an officer asked me, when are you going to apply, or are you bored with code enforcement yet? And I said, no, I love walking around doing downtown parking. And he goes, okay, well, contact me when you're bored. And I couldn't get that out of my head. And not that code enforcement isn't busy, and not that there isn't plenty to learn, but I just couldn't help that feeling of like, there's more, I can do more. And so that's when I really started to consider being a police officer. And we talked a lot about, you know, the different specialties you could do, and just kind of what it really, the bones of what being an officer would be. And so I decided to apply, and that's kind of my road to being an officer. It was, I didn't have any other experience other than and the reason that I'm a Pullman police officer is because I don't think I'd be an officer anywhere else. It wasn't me wanting to be a police officer, it was me wanting to be a Pullman police officer. I think we get a lot of, we get to do we get to work with people for the first time when they're in college a lot. We get to be a lot of people's first contacts with the law. And kind of like Garrett, if not me, then who was going to be that first contact? Like, I wanted to be able to persuade the younger generations, the college generations, the high schools, to have a different view on police. And I think that we have that ability, especially living in a college town, to do so. And that's one of my driving forces is I want to be the person that that people see. And I love my community. I love the Pullman Police Department. I love the Pullman WSU community, and I want to be able to serve them in that capacity. And from a fresh perspective, I guess I didn't grow up wanting to be a police officer. I decided that 20 months ago. And I think that kind of brings a fresh view to a lot of things that we do and how we approach things, or at least for me. So there's a big learning curve because, like I said, it wasn't something that I had always planned on doing, but I really enjoy being able to be a part of the community in a positive way. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead.
Ashley, I'll just say that it's fantastic that we see, the real you, that you're at Silverwood. Fantastic. I hope you're having fun.
We are.
Well, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
We love it.
Thanks, Ashley, for joining us. Feel free to return to your
get back on the slides.
activity. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next officer tonight is Love St. Andre. Love grew up in Tacoma. He initially started his higher education in Central Washington University and transferred to Washington State University, where he earned a degree in kinesiology. After graduation, he worked as a security supervisor and a personal trainer in the Seattle area. We hired Love in July of 2018. He attended the academy from October of 2018 to March of 2019, and he lives in Pullman with his wife and daughter. So Love, take it away.
You should be unmuted, I think, Liv.
We're not hearing any audio yet.
Everybody hear me?
There, now we have
Okay.
audio.
It was the headphones. All right. So I'm Love St. Andre. Thank you for the introduction, Chief. I've been with Pullman going on 2 years, July 23rd. And similar to Ashley's story, I did not grow up being a police officer. It never crossed my mind until probably 2016. I was a personal trainer before I graduated at the rec center, and I had a client who was a Pullman police officer who unfortunately is now in King County. But if you've ever had a personal trainer or you've ever done any coaching like that, you kind of know sometimes you kind of just conversate to like pass the time and make things a little bit more relaxed. And he talked a lot about being a police officer and even not having an interest then, and him having no reason to hide anything from me. He never had anything to say about the profession or the department that he worked for. And it was around the time of like Ferguson and all those things that were going on. And it wasn't until like a little while after that I kind of realized I had a subconscious desire to help people. And so the things that I've done, whether it be security or coaching or personal training or teaching PE classes, everything I've always wanted to do and desired to do revolved around that. And so after I decided to pursue law enforcement, I kind of have I have certain checkpoints that I use to decide where I was going to apply and where I wanted to work. It was first, exactly what city was it going to be in? Because I believe personally, whether it be a point of a degree or not, I think it's very important for an officer to live or want to live where they police. There are some cities, maybe if you're a newer officer coming up in the Seattle area, you might not be able to afford to live there. But I think it's important because when I go out and work every day, I also have to keep in mind and remember that when I'm on my weekend and I'm in the town with my family, I'm going to see people that I interacted with. And I feel like that naturally is going to make you present a different type of attitude and behavior when you're working. And I think that's very important that you kind of have that in this profession, because it's not a just work here and then leave the city and go back to where you live and stay. And Pullman checked that box. I mean, all of us live here or around here. We know how great of a city this is, and it's definitely a great place to live. And also, in like my early 20s, I'm 29 now, I kind of just got really big into wanting to get value and achievement and love just out of my life. And one of those things is valuing my time, what I do at home, but with how much all of us work, I believe you should value and love what you do outside of your home too, because that's going to be a big part of your life. If you're living every week for your weekend, that's a lot of your life that you're wasting. And I truly, truly enjoy what I do outside of my home. And I love that when my daughter sees police cars, she, even if I'm driving her, she says daddy or wants to see their lights, and it brings joy to her because she has that positive association that I didn't really grow up with. And another one of the things that drove me to Pullman, which kind of speaks to the times that we're in, was before I was applying and I was reading through like the annual report and stuff like that, and they kind of list things that they've done and they do. There were a couple things that really stuck out to me, and it's kind of going off of what Officer Willis said when he brought up how progressive our department is. For the size of our department, we're extremely progressive in this profession, as far as training and culture. One of the things that I loved reading about was the implicit bias training that the department had gone through, and I've gone through since I've already started a little less than 2 years ago. And I feel like that's big for this profession and really anyone in this world, because we all have biases, and if we recognize them before we act, react, or interact, it'll explain and be able to cause less problems in the world. I personally believe. And again, going off what Willis said, our department is very understanding and respecting of previous experiences that we've had. For example, Commander Opgenorth, at the end of field training, he usually has a day where he rides with the officer before they go out on their own. So instead of having your normal field training officer, Commander Opgenorth, well, he was Sergeant Opgenorth at the time, was riding with you to kind of see how you did your job. I mean, he sees all the reports, he sees all the evaluations and whatnot, but just one-on-one, see how you do your job. And ever since then, this was even before I was out of field training, before I was off probation, he was telling me that I should be a field training officer, because he said that he respected the type of person I was, and he knew the background that I had and things that I've done. And in bigger departments, that's not something that you're going to get. It's going to be something that they're indirectly or directly going to say that you need to earn. And not that I don't still have to work for it, but they don't tell people in that position to start looking at things like that, or that you should do this and a few years. And that's one of the things that has always stuck with me. And I tell him all the time, but I don't know if he really realizes how big of a deal that is to me. And also with that, once the school year starts, I'm going to be doing the college LB officer position, which is usually for somebody who has at least 3 years of experience on. But again, with the trust in my experiences and who I am, Chief Jenkins and Commander Oppie North have trusted me and believe in me to take that position. And again, it's incredible because I never expected to be in a specialty position before my 2-year anniversary. And so if anybody has any questions, I know it's kind of all over the place, but
Love, I will just say, I love how you say in Pullman you found, value, achievement, appreciation. And, we appreciate you as well. And so it's wonderful that you bring that and you show, not only do you have that, you found it here in Pullman as a community member, but here as an officer as well. And congratulations for your 2nd anniversary, having that field training. That's awesome. Great job.
Mm-hmm. Stephanie, I want to piggyback on that because I think the thing that I liked both about what Love and Garrett said is a big deal for Chief Jenkins and Jake, that they're learning about each person. Each person is an individual, and they're learning what's so great about them and really promoting that and pushing them to go into those specialties and do more. I love it. Good job, you guys.
thank you.
I have just a quick question, maybe a long part of the conversation for Chief. Thinking about being empowered and having a lot of that trust and faith put in you, thinking about, the fall, what are some of the ideas or what are you thinking about as it relates to, College Hill, students returning, the uncertainty of COVID, recognizing that, they're going to break a lot of rules and, we go into that knowing that they are. So I'm just curious to, you don't have to have answers, but just, if you could share kind of how you're approaching this or when it's kind of underlying kind of how you're thinking moving forward towards the fall when students return.
Yeah, the COVID thing has brought very interesting interactions with a lot of the public, whether it be in person or what we've all seen on social media. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about what they should be able to do versus what they feel like should be their choice and whatnot. And that's kind of what this job is in general. In the academy, we were taught a lot of black and white things, and not in a sense that everything is this or that way, but it's just when you're teaching law, when you're teaching tactics, you have that distinct outline, but the reality that they always push is that in the real world it's very gray. And for example, I had a call a couple days ago at one of the hotels here where somebody reported that there was a group who wasn't wearing their mask. And so I responded, and wearing my mask, of course. And I kind of just told them, I was like, hey, I'm not here to get anybody in trouble. I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of kind of the rules and regulations that we have for wearing our masks while we're in these types of settings. And they all kind of said, yeah, I know. And then majority of them, because they were having like a little barbecue or whatnot, majority of them just pulled out their masks and put them on. I find a lot more of this job is about education opposed to enforcement, and sometimes they go hand in hand. I've sat in holding facilities for 45 minutes talking with somebody that I arrested for something, who was telling me their mindset and kind of what's going on in their life that they believe led them to that situation. And just because I arrested them for something doesn't mean I don't want to sit down and kind of talk about how we can prevent this from happening. Because yes, a part of this job is doing that. And yes, I do want to put people who are opposing these crimes away or serve the justice that I see fit at the time. But I would more enjoy talking with them and figuring out how we can prevent this from happening. It's just like another thing that I love about our department is that we're never told that we need to go out and, all right, you need to write this many tickets or make this many traffic stops. So if you look at like the report, you'll see like how many warnings we let off. And it's because we realize that people make mistakes, whether it be like a brake light out. A lot of people aren't going to know that that happens unless somebody's watching them drive away. So we take that time to have a positive interaction and educate the people that we're contacting, so that they have a reasonable amount of time to fix it and prevent the behavior from happening again. So that was a pretty long answer, but essentially my biggest goal is education and positive interaction. Building a relationship that allows them to see the police department, but also see that these police officers are regular people outside of their uniform. You know, and that's something that I've always wanted to do in this job. Is one of the reasons why I'm so excited to do that position, because I know that was something that would have benefited me and a lot of people that I knew growing up. And so even though they're 18, 19-year-old people, I still think it can help them a lot going forward in life.
No, thank you. No, I look forward to watching, how they react and interact with you.
Thank you.
All right, anybody have any questions for Love? Any other questions? Well, Love and Garrett, thank you both very much for attending tonight. On your day off. So you do not have to stay for the rest of the meeting. If you don't want to, feel free to leave whenever you feel comfortable. So thanks again for coming tonight.
Thank you, Chief.
Stephanie, there was one thing that is not on the agenda that we should have had added was the proposed new member, Craig Watt.
Yes, and as we were talking, I just was like, oh no, that wasn't on the agenda, so it just completely slipped my mind. So a couple things, yes, so we do have one resignation from Chris Santucci, I probably butchered that last name, as he moved away. So all best wishes for Chris. But we do have Craig, who submitted for Pullman at Large. And so we would like to turn this time over to Craig just to kind of give a brief, tell us who you are, and then if there's any questions from the committee, and then we'll have Craig step out for a few minutes while we do our vote, and then bring Craig back. So, Craig?
Hello, everybody. My name is Craig Watt, and I'm an attorney. I work at Irwin, Michael Bus, Savage, and Brown, kind of across from Sweet Mutiny here in Pullman. I like to call myself an old guy, but a young attorney. I've been an attorney for about 4 years. 3 of those years I was practicing criminal law. I was a public defender for the Nez Perce tribe, and I also was a prosecutor for Asotin County. And down in the valley, I prosecuted primarily felonies and juveniles. And now, as a private attorney in practice, I represent defendants in cases where the court has appointed me, and also potentially privately if somebody were to retain me. I'm interested in being on the Police Advisory Committee for a number of reasons. One, because of my experience as a prosecutor and as a public defender, I interacted with law enforcement on a regular basis. And I feel like I add a balance because I have the perspective from both sides. And also, of course, being a private attorney doing criminal defense as well. And I view myself as being both potentially an educator and a learner. The police department serves the community. And so from my perspective, it's important that the police department have a good understanding of the desires of the community. And so as a potential member of the Police Advisory Committee, I would be a learner. I would learn from the community what's important from them, from their perspective, to be able to provide to the police department. As an educator, I'm an attorney. I have a number of years of criminal law experience, and so I can provide education regarding what the law is to both the community and both to law enforcement. And so sometimes there can be an instance where it appears a person is not breaking the law, but the reality is that, based upon an interpretation of the law, they are in fact breaking the law. And I can also, on the flip side, advise law enforcement of the law and also some of the technicalities regarding that. What's the likelihood that any kind of a charge that law enforcement makes would actually result in a conviction? And so as an attorney, I'm part of the checks and balances on law enforcement as well. It's my job to educate the judge, for example, on search warrant law or other types of law. And of course, the prosecutor on the other side tries to do the same thing, assumably, to educate a judge regarding the law and how it's applicable or not in a particular case. I will tell you, I was really excited to hear from the police officers, in particular because they're relatively green. And the reason for my excitement is because as an old dog, I can tell you that when you've done something for a long time, it's harder to break your bad habits. And so, younger law enforcement, they have fewer bad habits to break. They picked up fewer bad habits. And so they are kind of your optimal candidates from a training perspective, especially given the light that is being shown on law enforcement nationally at this time. And I guess I'll keep it at that. I won't talk a whole lot, but I appreciate y'all allowing me to speak. And if there are any questions, please fire them at me. And if I need to speak louder, let me know.
No, you're great, Craig. Thank you so much. Are there any questions from our advisory committee members for Craig? Okay, so with that, Craig, you will be placed into a breakout room while we discuss and conduct the vote, and we will bring you right back.
Thank you.
So Craig, go ahead and accept that invitation to the waiting room.
When I see it, I will accept it.
Oh, here, I think I can move you. Okay, no, you are still here.
I can always leave the meeting and come back if you like.
Hang on, I should be able to do this. Well, it is not happening. Well, according to this, you've already moved, but you obviously haven't. So, well, anyway, since this is recorded anyway, I'll just say that Stephanie and I met with Craig and talked with him, and I know that I feel that Craig would be a good addition to the Police Advisory Committee and provide some really good perspective. He's got a really good background to provide, a different perspective than most anyone else on the committee. So, Stephanie?
No, I concur. I think it'd be a fantastic learning for all of us, provide some great experience and some great education to all of us as well. So everything what you just said, Gary, I completely agree with. Do we want to hold the vote when Craig is still here, or how do we want to do that?
I think I figured out how to move it.
Okay.
No. Still here. Well, it shows them in the waiting room. Craig, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Well, so much for that. Okay, I guess we'll just do the vote.
Okay.
I've got a thick skin, so however it goes, I'm sure I'll be okay.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Does anybody have any comments, questions regarding Craig?
Nothing. I've always thought it was interesting that we do these because Gary said they're recorded, right? So you can just jump on YouTube and be like, so who didn't like me?
Well, technically, we actually stop the recording while we talk about, our people, and then we do the vote. So we technically don't record at this time, but yes, you're right, Dave.
If you see some heavy redaction, then
yeah. No, nothing. You said
no.
Okay. Nice perspective.
I would like to know though how we would utilize that expertise in a way that will benefit. I mean, it's his resume and his expertise is going to be beneficial, but how to play on the strengths of that would be nice conversation afterwards, in my opinion.
yeah, I would, Kenitra. There definitely is because of the role of the Police Advisory Committee, it's not going to be as much operational as it's policy. So you're right. That will be a good discussion.
Anybody else before we go to the vote? Going once, twice, 3 times. All right, we're done. So, do we have a motion? Do we need to have a motion for approving Craig?
Motion?
Okay, second.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
You both second.
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Any opposed? All right. Wonderful. Well, Chief Jenkins, would you like to welcome Craig?
Craig, welcome to the committee. Congratulations, and you're now a member and can participate as a member.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I will move back to the topic where we were, and I'm going to share one of my screens here. So this is the main page on the police department website, and if you haven't gone to this page, I'll show you how to navigate there. So you go to About Us. And then Culture, Policies, and Accountability. So I'm going to talk about a number of the items that are listed here, but this is here for the community to view and for you as well. So again, I just wanted to kind of provide some kind of baseline about what we've been doing and what we're doing, and before we can decide whether we need to make changes and what those changes will be. So first of all is our community policing philosophy. And there's just a short sentence here really about community policing, but I came to Pullman PD in July of 2010. And since that time, I've been working to change the culture at the police department and really the philosophy from what that was really, and you heard this from, I think, Love St. Andre about not being told to go out and write so many tickets or make so many arrests. We've moved from a culture of really looking at stats, the number of arrests, the number of traffic stops, the number of citations to evaluate an officer's performance, to more of a model where we're looking at solving problems. And so this is now all built into our performance evaluation system. And that is what we're showing as value of what we want from our staff. And that is going out in the community, working with the community and solving problems, not generating numbers. And so to me, that's what community policing is about. And it's sometimes you hear about a police department that has a community policing unit or a bureau, or certain officers are doing this and that with community policing. At Pullman Police Department, it's department-wide. It's not just the police officers, it's also our support staff. It's not a program, it's a philosophy. And so everyone in our department is expected to have that community policing philosophy. Body-worn cameras, we were a relatively early adopter in early 2013. After Ferguson occurred, there was this nationwide movement to equip law enforcement with body-worn cameras. That was about a year after we implemented it and made it mandatory for all of our officers. I won't talk a lot about complaints tonight, but we do have, we accept any complaint from the community about conduct of our officers. And I will just note that we generate a number of complaints internally. We don't just initiate a complaint because someone outside the department has made a complaint. We also internally, because of things that we see or other coworkers see that does not meet our expectations, generates an internal investigation. So we do a lot of watching of our own. 21st century policing, I won't talk a lot about this right now, but this talks a lot about, this is the report that was generated when Barack Obama was president, and the 21st century policing, there was a task force put together. Sue Rohr, who is she's an ex-sheriff of King County. She's now the director of the Criminal Justice Training Commission. She was invited to be part of this task force, and you can definitely see a lot of her philosophy ingrained in this report. Washington State is a leader in this area, mainly because Sue Rohr has led this really on a nationwide level and brought it to the state of Washington. But something that you'll hear us talk about is procedural justice, working with Professor Macon on really identifying what that looks like in practice. And this shows the tenets really of procedural justice. And so you'll be hearing more about this as we work more with Dr. Macon on some of this research. We hear a lot about training for police officers, and you heard some of the newer officers talk about that, and training is extremely important. Training a lot of times is what makes the difference between a competent professional organization versus one that's not. But when we talk about things like ethics and character and morals, there's just some things you can't train people for. And so we place a lot of focus on our selection process, on integrity and character of the people that we hire, So we're very picky, we're very selective, and we look into the backgrounds of applicants, places that they worked, their coworkers, their prior bosses, people that worked for them, friends, acquaintances. The program that we use now for pre-employment testing, public safety testing, they actually have an element of part of their testing that includes an intercultural sensitivity dimension that puts that on a scale when they're tested. There's other dimensions that include integrity, service orientation, social engagement with others, customer service, conflict resolution, team orientation, cognitive abilities, problem solving, stress tolerance, and ethical decision making. So that's just part of the initial test, just to get an interview with the interview panel. And then we have an interview panel, we have a chief's interview, and then we have a thorough background process. So there is a lot of work put into when we hire someone. And so to me, that is just of critical importance to us. And then after we pick the best of the best, then we provide that training on top of that. But again, I think there's just some things that we cannot train people for. We need to start with a good ethical person that's shown good decision making in their past. This also talks about this committee and the constituencies here. And I want to tell you that there's a lot of time that we have this committee involved in things that are very helpful to me. But to be honest with you, the reason this committee exists, the best example of why this committee is so important is what's going on right now nationally and concerns about law enforcement. And so I really value this committee to have such a broad section of the community that's well represented in a lot of different constituencies that can bring to me what the community needs and what the community wants, and can help also in that communication back and forth with the community. So the most critical time for this committee really is right now. This is, to me, the real benefit of having a committee like this. Multicultural student leaders, Love will be going to these meetings with me, the College Hill officer. There's a regular monthly meeting that is put together by Donna Arnold in the Multicultural Student Services, and we meet with all of the group leaders from the multicultural student organizations. And the main benefit of that is just really networking and establishing a relationship, a positive relationship, and communication, so that when issues do come up, we're not trying to create and enhance those relationships or develop those relationships after a crisis. It's before an incident occurs that we already have those relationships developed, and we can sit down and have a good, honest discussion with a group of people that have already developed this relationship together. So that's been really beneficial. A few years ago, we were working to develop a new immigration policy based on things that were happening nationally with immigration. So I worked with a partner that is not typically one that is an ally with law enforcement, and that's the ACLU. But I worked with this group because they had a real passion for making sure that law enforcement was doing the right thing with regard to their policies in immigration. And we wanted to do the right thing as well. And so we worked together for a number of months and finally came to a policy that we both felt good about, and that the ACLU actually has used as a model policy throughout the state when they work with other agencies. So I'm proud of the work that we did there, but I think it's an example of something that can be done with partners that aren't typically partners. Social media has been really good for us, Darby does a fantastic job on social media and getting our message out. If you follow any of our social media, you see that it's not just all flowers and roses. I mean, we get pushback on things regularly. And Darby does a great job keeping that positive. It provides a way also for us to listen to the community within that particular venue. So we know where we really get the most pushback really is internally in our organizations. There's, I think some people feel that it unnecessarily makes us a target for people to post things that are critical of us. And my feeling is that we need to be able to hear criticism. And what ends up happening as well is more often than not, our local community comes to our defense when there's some unfair criticism that's posted. So I think it's been a really important part of our communication with our community. Of course, ride-alongs are, right now we have them mostly suspended, but normally we have it open to anyone 16 years of age or older. We invite anyone to come and ride and see what the officers do and how they do it. So training, there's a lot of information here on training. I'll go back a little bit to the basic academy, where Washington really is a leader in the nation that has transitioned their basic police academy from what would be called a warrior mentality to a guardian mentality. So what that really means is that we're developing new police officers who can build relationships and solve problems with community members, and police with compassion. Our mission statement that was developed by our supervisory team a few years ago was policing our community with compassion and professionalism. So compassion is an important part of how we expect our staff to do their job. The guardian philosophy came from Plato's Republic, where Plato said that a guardian is defined as a warrior philosopher. And what that means is that you absolutely need the skill and the strength and courage of a warrior, but also need the temperance and wisdom and gentleness of a philosopher. So it's adding that compassion element to law enforcement. And Washington State is a leader in that nationwide. Now in the police academy as well, there's 200 hours of de-escalation, mental health, and patrol tactics training, which is a lot out of 748 total hours. So that's a big chunk of time out of the academy for those things that have become very important to communities. It also includes cultural competency and implicit bias training. Love was talking about the implicit bias training he has had in his first 2 years. We just rolled out another implicit bias training again today, required for all of our staff. So we have that regularly. And then after the academy, there is a required training for our staff. There's a state minimum, which is 24 hours a year, which is not very much. Our officers average an area of, I think, around 70 or 80 hours a year of advanced officer training. And some of that involves different skills that require regular training just to maintain proficiency, like firearms and defensive tactics and those types of things. And then as well as the training such as implicit bias and de-escalation. And then use of force is the last section here. We conduct a thorough use of force review anytime that an officer uses force. We actually classify use of force at an extremely low level, which is essentially taking a hold of someone, and if we have to move them at all or apply a hold to them, that's considered use of force in our department. And so it requires another report by the officer that's submitted, and then Commander Opgenorth reviews the entire police report and all body-worn camera and in-car video of every officer that was at the scene to determine if it's within policy. And I'll talk about use of force again in a minute. So these are the things that we have been doing. And now I'll talk about some of the newer things that we're doing and that we plan to do. One of the newer policies that we implemented really just a few weeks ago is an intervention policy that requires officers to actually intervene if they see a coworker that they believe is using excessive force. We are in the process of revising our entire policy manual. The policy manual that we have right now was one that was just had been created many years ago that I inherited when I got here at Pullman. We've been working the last few years on transitioning to what is called the Lexipol policy manual. Lexipol is a company that provides policy manuals to law enforcement agencies nationwide, and it's so the one that they provide to Washington law enforcement agencies is based on Washington, well, it's based on starting with federal law and best practices, and then by state, by case law, legislation, and best practices as well. And then we take that policy and we can customize it, the procedures in those policies to be specific to our agency. And we're in that process right now. It's really the end part of that process where we've made customizations to it. We've handed it off to our police union. They are reviewing it now. And then as things come up, if we feel we need to implement a policy before the entire policy manual is ready to be implemented, we're implementing those policies one at a time. And so the intervention directive is one of those policies that is included in the new manual. But since the new manual isn't ready yet to be deployed, we have implemented that policy just as a standalone for now. You know, we've seen some use of force incidents that were high profile in the last couple of years. Those use of forces were actually within policy and were within the training of our department. But I have to tell you that I know that some of those looked really bad. Use of force rarely looks good when we use it, but I saw some things I didn't like. And so what we've done is I brought in a trainer who is a national use of force expert who has had experience working with Department of Justice, with agencies on some of the requirements that the federal government has placed on agencies. And he came in for 1 full week and taught our entire command staff, including me and Commander Opkin North, all of our supervisors and all of our trainers on use of force. The name of the instruction was Use of Force Transformative Practices for Trainers and Supervisors. And so what that has done is it's recalibrated our use of force and how we view use of force. And so we're now in the process of making revisions to our policy manual is one of the things, our use of force policy we're revising. And we're also looking at how we provide training, which tells our officers what the expectations are for them when they are using force. So between policy and training, those are the things that we provide to them of our expectations. And so those are things in progress right now. We've recognized the need for that, and so we're making some changes. In, I think it was January of 2019, there was a national use of force data collection program that started. It's all voluntary. Law enforcement agencies across the nation can voluntarily provide use of force data to this database that's available online. We started providing information actually retroactively to January of 2018. And so we are part of that voluntary participation in this program. We've been working a lot with Dr. Macon on a lot of different research. For those of you that don't know, Dr. Macon, he's the lab director of the Complex Social Interactions Lab at Washington State University in the WSU Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology. We have given, with the agreement of our police union, complete access to all of our body-worn camera video. And so he, and there will be a time that Dr. Macon, I would love to have him explain all the different research he's doing, but a lot of it involves use of force and analyzing use of force. Some of the research that he has done on use of force, along with Professor Willits, is analyzing body-worn camera video on use of force and its relation to race. And one of the things that he found with our body-worn camera video was that Pullman police officers there was no evidence that Pullman police officers were more likely to use force more quickly at higher levels or for longer durations in situations involving minority suspects. So that says a lot to me about our use of force. But even with that, there are some things I still did not like about our use of force, and we're going to make changes anyway. I appreciate the research that's been done on this, and I'm talking to Dr. Macon now about the possibility of doing some more research on some disparity we're seeing in traffic stops and arrests. And so I want to find out, I want to get the information about what is causing that disparity so we know what changes we need to make to address that, if any. In 2019, we set out to create a strategic plan. What we ended up with was a strategic vision, which to me is a lot more beneficial to us because a strategic vision is a lot more, has a lot more longevity. And as time passes, we can adjust our strategic plan to continue to meet that vision. But I just pulled out a couple of highlights from that strategic vision that kind of apply to what we're talking about today. First of all, our overall vision statement is that Pullman PD is a leader in the law enforcement profession. So this is something that is aspirational to us and to our staff, and something that we aspire to be. So some of the things that came about during this process that came as part of the vision for our department is that staff values ethical behavior, staff values hiring and retaining high quality staff. Pullman PD is a trusted and valued community partner. Pullman PD maintains authentic relationships with community partners. We continually engage community partners transparently and honestly. We recognize the value of listening, and we participate in meetings with community partners. And I will stop sharing our screen because I don't think we need to share that anymore. So I guess one of the other things that I wanted to talk about a little bit was law enforcement agencies and practices. It's my observation that across the country, there are significant differences from region to region of the country with law enforcement agencies and how they operate and expectations. There's some differences from state to state. Some of those I mentioned, like regarding the police academy in Washington State. And then there's differences from department to department in professionalism, training, culture, and expectations, and pay. I've worked for 3 different law enforcement agencies in 2 different states, beginning from the late 70s until now. And each department that I worked for was different, and not so much in what they do, but in how they do it. One of the examples is that when I talked about we don't put a lot of emphasis on our statistics. We've transitioned away from that, and some departments have not done that. Some departments still put a lot of emphasis on statistics and not so much on problem solving. You heard from Garrett Willis about our training. We place a very high value on training in our department, and I think it is beneficial in that it adds to the professionalism and competency in the skills of our staff. So I think I just wanted to point out that every department has a different culture, they have different priorities, and they have a different relationship with their community. And so I think when we look at our department, we need to look at our department. It's fine if we want to compare with other departments and see what other departments are doing and take some good ideas that other departments might have. But my friend that works for the TSA, he's a law enforcement director for Eastern Washington, says, well, if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport, because airports are so different from one to another. And I would say that about police departments too. While there are many commonalities, if you're looking at their culture and their values and their priorities, if you've seen one police department, you've seen one police department. They're all different. So just in conclusion, I just would say that members of the Pullman Police Department, they're dedicated to providing law enforcement services to the community in a way that the community can be proud of. We value our relationship with our community and their trust in us. And we'll always look for ways to enhance those relationships and that trust. And we'll always continue to look for ways to do things better. And like, Garrett Willis couldn't have said it better. I wish I had scripted his thing tonight, because he did a great job, and I didn't prompt him at all. I just told him the topics we wanted to talk about, but he did a great job. And so, he talked about some differences between the department he was at and where he came to, and the value that we see here. And I see that in our staff as well, but that we don't want to look at doing the same thing because that's the way we've always done it. We always want to look at, can we do something better? And so I think that's where we're at right now. We want to listen to the community. We want to hear where there are issues and where we can do better. So with that, Stephanie, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Chief Jenkins. So, a wonderful presentation. And I have to say, you do such a wonderful job with this community. And, and also I have to say, Darby, you do a fantastic job with social media. I'm waiting for those duckling pictures to come in for the rescue that happened over the weekend, which is also very important, of course, to all of us, not only helping all of our community and protecting us, but protecting all the ducklings too. That is really important, that we need to know everything what happened. But one of the questions I had for you, Gary, is with the recent events and the Black Lives Movement, what issues has Pullman Police Department faced, or what has been brought forward, if anything?
Well, I think the only thing really specific that I've heard about our agency, other than, they want us to listen to the community. Let me bring that information up here. There's an initiative called 8 Can't Wait, which is, I'm not sure exactly where it started, but I've heard this come from, excuse me, the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's 8 initiatives that I've seen across the nation that are, I guess, demands being made of law enforcement agencies nationwide. And there's 8 different topics on that that involve chokeholds, de-escalation, warnings before shooting, exhausting all alternatives before shooting, duty to intervene, ban shooting at moving vehicles, require use of force continuum, and require comprehensive reporting. So if we have time, we can talk about each of these, because there's some what I want to say, some description that I would have to provide for all of these to explain my position on them, but this is really the only thing that's been specific. And again, it takes me back to, where are we now? And we could compare what we're doing now with this. And a number of these we are already doing. Some of them, depending on what your definitions are, we might not be. And some of them I have a disagreement with. So that might be a topic for another day, but to answer your question, that's been really the only specific thing that I've seen as far as a request or demand.
One last comment I'll just say is, you made a mention about you've seen one police department, you've seen one police department. With family, growing up with the Portland Police Department in Oregon, we've seen that very different, and it's a very different feel and a very different run of that department, what it was several years ago to now. And I just have to say, from being in Pullman, what you have with the community policing and everything is really quite valuable for myself as a parent, but as a community member as well. And what are things that you're looking for from our community members to help you and your officers be better at the community policing and becoming one as a whole large community?
Yeah, I think that's really just to become engaged. And we would be most ineffective without any type of community engagement or community trust, really, as well. Where we can be most effective is when we have that community engagement and participation and trust. And so that's all involved in a community relationship to me. And so that engagement just enhances the community safety that we have and makes us an effective law enforcement agency, because we can't do it all on our own. This is all about being part of the community. And so we're looking to be partnering with the community as much as we can and in different ways, and in some innovative ways. Dr. Macon has been a great example of that. I think he's been a fantastic partner with us, providing some really actionable research, which is hard to come by in criminal justice. And he does research with the intent of improving law enforcement, which again is unique. And so I think that's one example of kind of a unique partnership that we have here that we can be proud of, that will make us a better community.
Great. So we have a couple hands raised. I think, I could be wrong, sorry, but I think, Adam, you had your hand raised first, so we'll go to you.
I know Dr. Macon did first, but I'll take advantage of it. I was wondering, because you did mention every department is unique, but our community is also unique in the sense that so many members that come through on specific times of the year that are actually from other places and other communities and are used to other departments. And I know you already have a really well-established practice of engaging the students. And I'm curious what you may be doing or maybe planning because of current events for this fall, when we do have new people back to Pullman and the Palouse and Moscow that have been experiencing a totally different summer than we have here. And so they're going to bring their concerns with them, and perhaps, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because we face that every year when we have new students come to Pullman and they are bringing their experiences and expectations of law enforcement from wherever they're coming from. And sometimes that isn't such a good experience. And so it is a regular challenge for us to engage with them. And part of the way that we do that is through our College Hill Officer Program. That's one of the reasons that we have that. It's going to be a little bit more challenging this year just because of COVID-19 and some of the restrictions that we're going to have. But we have Love St. Andre is new to the position. He's eager to do a really good job. I think he'll have a lot of good ideas. He's also going to be picking the brains of the previous College Hill officers as well. So I don't know that I have a good answer for you, other than it's something that we do look at every year, and it's a regular challenge for us.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so now we'll go to Dr. Macon. Sorry.
No. And I'm just David. Just David.
Yes.
Not a Dave. I'm a David. So when I want to circle back to what Kenitra said earlier, you look at the 5 demands of the Black Lives Matter movement, right? The Pullman Police Department, Gary, we had this conversation. You excel at the ones you can control, but there's always been one lingering one that is not being met. And so I say this as a community member, not a professor. Just this is my expertise. Just as a father and a community member. You're revising your policies. I would encourage the Pullman Police Department to think about ways in which this committee can be tasked with providing that independent oversight, right? So much of the bail movement has been calling for external accountability of police misconduct, from low-level complaints up to use of force, that the community needs to be involved. And you can't take this to the community at large. You really have to think about a targeted group. And I would argue that's what this body is, right? We are a committee, and I know that we have a role in policy, not operations. But this may be a time where you're thinking about, what does the Pullman Police Department, the Pullman community need? I would argue part of what undermines some of those community misperceptions or not confusion, it really is this misperception or this mistrust, is that we don't have an external, citizen-driven accountability mechanism that's absent. And it is common for police departments to use members in those particular ways to just increase the transparency and accountability around issues of police misconduct.
Yeah, that's a good point, David. And this is the perfect committee to do that. As I mentioned before, it's got a broad representation, and those are the ideal things that can really be beneficial to us as a police department. In fact, Commander Opgenorth and I have been talking. It sounds kind of silly right now if you're talking about the use of force and things like that, but we've been struggling with a gratuities policy for a while. It's been a struggle, and so that's something maybe we can start with to break ground on. But also, when you're talking about the accountability and maybe in some sense oversight, and I think there's some things that we can do there with regard to our internal investigations and discipline that the Police Advisory Committee can have a role in, that I think will provide some of that transparency in the community.
I mean, even if it's adding, a subcommittee, and we have rules and procedures around membership and duration. I mean, I think it's well worth, exploring, because you look at those 5 demands. I mean, you can't control training in terms of at the academy, but everything else you have control over, right? And I think you're already, as the Pullman Police Department meets all of those, right? Like, you're focusing on de-escalation. You're doing all the things you should be doing, and you're ahead of a lot of agencies. But this is, one area where, unfortunately, Pullman is behind a lot of other departments that have those particular guidelines and policy around how to engage this type of group.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It is sometimes difficult to navigate with union issues as well. So that's something that we will have to navigate. But no, I think it's important. And let me also mention, a really important piece of this puzzle has been my second in command, Commander Opgenorth. He and I are on very much the same page, and he, as far as operationally, he is able to take all of these ideas and aspirations and translate it down to the operational level and in the way of expectations for all of our staff in patrol and code enforcement and detectives. So I'm fortunate that he's my second in command because he really helps make all this stuff happen. So kudos to you, Jake.
Yes, great job, Jake. Okay, our next hand raised is Krista.
Hey. I love Pullman because we have David who helps with this and his wonderful daughter Isabella, and we have new members that are attorneys. And I think in our community we have so many people who can help. What I want your comment on, Chief Jenkins, and this is, I don't want to get too political here. You know, there's the defund the police movement, and I think we've all learned that that doesn't mean, you know, don't give them any money. I think it means more reallocate money. How do we serve those citizens who just aren't mentally healthy, who do need more social work kind of help? I think you all have made some really good decisions in the past where you remove a firearm and de-escalate, step back, put on civilian clothes, you know, do the smart things. How do you make those decisions where it goes from being a police officer to being a social worker, and do you have some of those resources?
Well, we've been probably the last 3 or more years, the city's very active in advocating for legislation beneficial to Pullman. And they always ask for input from department heads. And one of my topics has always been mental health services in the state because we're severely lacking in those resources. And what ends up happening is it falls in the lap of law enforcement,
Yes.
and a lot of times in not such a good way.
It's not fair.
But so what we have to do is deal with what we have right now, which we have been doing. And as you mentioned, and again, this is where Jake and I are on the same page. We have these incidents where we have someone that is a potentially violent situation, but there's no urgency. And so there's no need for us to rush in and do anything. And so maybe in the past, law enforcement might have rushed in and might have ended in a bad result. We take a breath and step back and say, there's not an urgency here, and things resolve in a much better way. So I think we kind of have that viewpoint, and operationally we're making that work. But there's definitely a need for more mental health resources, and so that's something that I think as community members and citizens can also communicate to their legislators that particular need.
That's good to know. Thank you. And by the way, if you ever have anyone internally that is giving you pushback on the social media posts, please have them come see me and Stephanie, because we're big Darby fans, because those posts are awesome. They're positive, they're informative, funny, they're serious. They're excellent, Darby. I just couldn't be more proud of you.
We had we posted some information about some masks that were going to be available to low-income residents. And I got a call from the county emergency manager about 20 minutes after Darby posted something and said he'd already received a ton of phone calls in less than 20 minutes after that information was posted. And he said, "You guys must have a good social media following."
I believe that. It's true. It's true. She does a great job.
So Gary and Darby, I do know that we are officially out of time, but I would like to take Kanitra's and Kanitra's comment, and also if it's okay with you, just to stay on a little bit longer for anybody other comments and questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Kanitra.
We have audio. We can hear you.
We can hear you. Oh.
Nope, now we can't.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I've been having the most technology nightmares ever. So when we talk about use of force continuum, like opportunity, capability, and threat or intent, I heard you speak all night about how much training your officers receive, but as an individual who is watching Facebook and is seeing what is being unleashed on people, it would probably be hard as a civilian to understand what the use of force continuum is and to understand the levels of thought process that go into it. And so what are your thoughts on educating the public on what the use of force continuum is and making that training more transparent so that somebody watching it on Facebook who doesn't have the context or the background might be better able to understand?
Yeah, well, I think doing something maybe like we did at a previous meeting where we had one of our use of force trainers, Greg Umbright, come in and give a presentation and do a demonstration about some use of force and how we train our officers and what we train our officers. I think he can also talk about what the use of force continuum is and what that looks like, and compare it to what we use, which would be considered, what we call it maybe an options model with force modulation. So those are kind of some technical terms that we could talk about and why we prefer that model to this other model. But I think that's definitely a good topic to talk about that can lead us into talking about our use of force policy.
Nice, thank you so much.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Not so much a question, but Chief Jenkins was just reelected. I see he's smiling. We didn't get to hear it. It wasn't in the notes, Darby. He got reelected. That's great news for WASPIC.
So, yeah, thank you, David. So I'm on the executive board for the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. My term was coming up and I was just reelected. And when we're talking about legislation, WASPIC is very involved in, we actually have a full-time policy advisor who is also what do you call them when they're advocating for you with the legislators. And so we're very active in, say, trying to get more mental health resources in Washington State. And also we've been involved in the conversation about law enforcement use of force. We have a member that's on the brand new task force that was just formed by the governor on law enforcement in Washington State. So the group is very active and involved in things that are going on, the new changes and reforms.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, any final questions from anybody, the community?
And do we need to, I don't know if we can, if people can unmute themselves or if we need to unmute the people on calls. Well, I just unmuted everybody I could unmute. But
you managed to unmute everyone.
Yeah, but there's some people are still muted.
They declined.
So anyone else have any questions, comments?
How was the 4th of July?
Pardon me?
How was the 4th of July? Anything eventful?
There were a couple of small fires and we just had our regular fireworks calls. Obviously there was no community celebration other than watching from somewhere in Pullman.
Oh, we do have one hand raised from Ryan and Nicole.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So I had kind of a question on complaints and how those end up in officers, how those end up in the department. Are those handled through an actual Pullman police officer, or is that done through a third party or via the web or the internet? Just kind of curious if there's a barrier to access to filing a complaint for anybody like the police department.
Yeah, so we'll take complaint over the phone, by email, a form that's filled out and mailed in or brought in, or somebody that just walks in. So we'll take a complaint any way that it's delivered. And then what happens after the complaint is made really depends on the level of seriousness of the allegation. So if it's something that maybe an officer was rude to someone, then a lot of times we'll handle that with just the supervisor with the employee. But if it's something more serious, we'll do a full investigation, and a supervisor will have protocols that are established through our labor contract of how those are investigated. And however, we do a full investigation, similar to a criminal investigation, really. And then if we determine that there was misconduct, then we assess discipline, again, based on the severity of the misconduct. So that a very short, did that answer the question that you had?
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Craig.
Thanks, Chief. I got a question for you. Based on the information you're providing, it seems like, Pullman is got a little bit of a different perspective than other agencies in the state and or nationally. So when we're talking about use of force policy, the flip side of that goes towards discretion, officer discretion. And so I wondered, basically, no answer needed right now, but if you could provide to the committee some of the statistics that might show use of force data versus, discretionary related data, which could be like a non-arrest, a contact, but a non-arrest. And that might be information that might be helpful for the community in their understanding of how the police force operates and how it might operate differently from other jurisdictions. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and that's good feedback to get, and I appreciate that, because that's, sometimes I'm not sure exactly what kind of data we should be providing, or what does the community want? What do they want to hear about? And so, yeah, it's great to hear from committee members on those topics. So it helps us decide what information to provide. We have endless amounts of data, so we can provide all day long, all kinds of data.
Gary, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I don't see any more hand raised. Do you want to talk about the BLM summit proposal?
Darby, do you want to talk about what you saw on another agency?
Oh, I did. It wasn't anything in depth. I just saw that a police department in Illinois was holding a summit. Theirs was actually related to autism. They were trying to get public input that would help them to better respond to calls involving people on the autism spectrum. So they were doing a summit and advertising on social media that if you were interested in being a part of that, contact them. And so I suggested to the chief that it might be worth considering doing something similar related to the Black Lives Matter thing and opening up some sort of summit where whoever from the community wanted to be a part of it could join in.
Yeah, Darby, that sounds really interesting. I would like to know more about this, and we can take that offline.
Okay, and I can definitely reach out to that department and see what kind of stuff they were doing at their summit.
Great. So I do know that we are 10 minutes past time, but Gary, do you want to give us a quick police department update?
Sure. All right. So right now we're at 29 officers. So we're authorized 33. So we have 4 vacancies. One of those vacancies was Don Huroff, who retired in June to follow his wife to Kansas, where she got a job in veterinary medicine. Joseph Guile is in the academy right now. They restarted the academy classes, and so he's due to graduate September 11th. Jared Hulk, who's number 29, will be starting an academy class July 28th, and he'll graduate November 20th. So that'll give us 29. The way it's looking in the budget right now, I don't have clear direction at the moment, but it's very likely we're going to have to carry these vacancies for a while just because of the negative impact that COVID-19 has had on city revenues. But I will update you on that when I know more. But we are continuing a recruitment to fill those positions so that we are collecting applications so that when we can hire, we'll be ready to do that. We've had to cancel hundreds of hours of training, unfortunately. Most of it was just canceled. The training vendor canceled just because of COVID-19. A lot of places now are regrouping to provide online training, but there were hundreds of hours of training hours that our staff were scheduled for and didn't get. Our patrol and code enforcement staff went to 12-hour schedules previously to make smaller work groups and to have no overlap between the shifts to reduce the chance of any kind of COVID-19 exposure between staff. We've since gone back to 10-hour schedule. Actually, we moved to a new 10-hour schedule just in the last few days for both patrol and code enforcement. Some of our staff are still working from home part of the time. And our city management is actually encouraging that where we can do that. Whitcomb has a new director. There was someone that was from internal, Wendy Barrett, who was operations manager, hired as the new Whitcomb director. And that was just the last few weeks. We just started getting direction this morning on our 2021 and 22 two-year budget. And it's looking like they're asking us to put together a budget similar to the budget we have right now, which is a budget that's been cut due to COVID-19. So a lot of our overtime and training has been cut, and that we'll probably see the same over the next couple of years, or at least the first year until we see what are happening with revenues. And so we're looking at ways to try to get training done in other ways. That's all I've got.
Thanks, Gary. Any comments or questions? All right, does anybody have any constituencies poll that they would like to discuss? All right, well, we've kept you long enough. Thank you so much for staying with us even past the time. I appreciate all of you. Our next meeting is August 10th. We will determine if that will be virtual or in person, and we'll let you know shortly. But have a wonderful evening and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.